On tonight's episode, we're going to cover the Bengals, baby. Also, the Rays have a story. We're going to do some basketball talk with Finn. Hi, Finn.
Hello, good to be back.
Yeah. Other than that, we're also going to cover in more detail. I mean, it's March Madness, right? So we got to do bracket talk. So we're going to do some bracket talk. We're going to cover some stories related to that. And that's going to be about it. So welcome, everybody, to the Jersey Tales, a mascot's take on sports, or at least something close to it. On tonight's episode, we've got Lexi in the booth. Silox is here, Yukon, and of course Finn. And it's me, Red the Ram. Welcome everybody. Let's get started. So, just to point out real quick, the whole reason why the Bengals are still here on the list is because somebody on this call was right again about the Bengals. Huh? Wonder who that could have been. Maybe me. Because that's right. He and Chase have signed their deal, and it actually kind of works out for us a little bit this year. So we might even be able to keep Trey, which it sounds like that's what we're trying to do. And so after that, the rest of that money hopefully is going to go to the defense. And I hope we just draft a whole bunch of other D players. So, yay, Bengals, baby! Like it's I'm back to being excited. So I just wanted to throw that out there because, I've been right about these things quite a bit this season.
Listen, I will admit I doubted that the Cincinnati Bengals, owned by the famously frugal Mike Brown, would actually pull this off with T. Higgins and both Jamar Chase. So credit where credit is due. I will take my verbal lashing from you for being wrong.
I mean, I could understand where you would get that idea from Palmer, maybe spreading that rumor a bit too much. But people keep forgetting we paid AJ Green and Andy Dalton a giant pile of money relative to the cap back when his deal was coming out, and everyone knew that like Dalton was not worth that money, but we paid it. So, yes, he's notoriously cheap on a lot of things, a lot of very silly things that he really shouldn't be cheap on. But at the same time, when it comes to the team, he's willing to put a little bit of money into it. So, next year, I'm hoping that we're doing good. I'm not going to make any projections next year as to far like how we're going to do because I did that last year and it all blew up in my face. And I don't feel like doing playoff watch. Bengals, baby, we're coming. We're going to look good. And hopefully we draft well, which we never do. But we might this time. Maybe once. So the next big story is the Rays.
Boy. Yes.
I believe this is yours.
So I've been following the whole Tampa Bay Rays saga for a while now. And in a way, it sort of kind of, to an extent, mimics the whole situation that occurred with the NHL's Phoenix, or I guess Arizona Coyotes. Not a perfect one-to-one, but there are some similarities. So the TLDR is the Tampa Bay Rays are currently in limbo right now, thanks in large part to what has gone on with Tropicana Field being unfortunately damaged severely by Hurricane Milton last October. They've been, for years now, trying to figure out how to replace the Trop, whether that be stay in St. Petersburg and get a new stadium, move up to Tampa itself, over to Ybor City. And it sort of came to a head this week. So, if you don't know, the Rays are not proceeding with the $1.3 billion stadium in St. Petersburg. And a lot of that has to do with the hurricanes and costly delays as well. And so this sort of leaves the team in a bit of a quandary on how do they proceed. Now, behind the scenes, it's been reported that Rob Manfred and several owners have privately pressured principal owner of the Rays, Stu Sternberg, to sell the team. And so far, publicly, he has said the Rays have they're not for sale. However, that has not quelled rumors that the Rays might be leaving town in the not too distant future for Orlando or other places north. So just to wrap it all up, I see this playing out in one of three ways. One, which I think is the most obvious, the team stays in Tampa, St. Pete, with the same owner, but they more than likely play it out at Steinbrenner Field, where the Yankees, I believe that's their double A or single A. No, that's their spring training facility.
Yeah, it's their spring training. I think the Rays double or like single A team plays there. Somebody single, but it's also the Yankees spring training stadium.
Right. So I think that, at least for this year, I think that might be the likeliest play. And then after that, they get something done with St. Petersburg to where they do repairs on Tropicana Field. The next likely thing would be the Rays are sold, but they stay in Tampa, St. Pete. There are multiple ownership groups who have come forward and said, hey, we want to buy the Rays, but we want to keep them in the general area. I think that's probably the next likeliest thing to happen. Maybe get a stadium in, like I said, Ybor City. That's a big, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name of that area of Tampa. But I feel like that's the next likeliest thing. But the most far-fetched thing would be for the Rays to move. I don't think it's there yet. I don't think people in Salt Lake City, Portland, or even Charlotte should be celebrating yet. I don't see a path to where the Rays are sold to an outside ownership group and they leave Tampa St. Pete in the near term. Not
I mean,
now.
are those the only places you can think that they might end up? Would be just those three, because those are the three expansion cities.
So there's also Nashville. The reason I didn't say Nashville is because they've already sunk a lot of money into the new Titan Stadium, and oh gosh, they sunk money into something else there as well. But the mayor has come out and said they're financially tapped out, so they can't publicly afford any more stadiums. So any kind of team that would move in would have to eventually build their own stadium somewhere in the city, and they don't have the money to do it, because let's be honest, no owner is going to build and fund their own stadium, not in America. So I didn't list them for that matter. For that, there's also Orlando. There's this group called the Orlando Dreamers. Barry Larkin, for those who don't know, a very famous baseball player. He is a part of that group, and what they want to do is they want to purchase the Tampa Bay Rays and eventually move them to Orlando. There's even renderings of an indoor 45,000 seat facility in the city. So those are some of the cities that I could see them moving to. I'd say Salt Lake City is probably top of that list. They've been getting a lot of teams recently with the Utah Hockey Club, and they might get an MLB team either through a team moving or expansion in the not too distant future. But I think, just to wrap this up in a pretty bow, the Rays situation is really unfortunate because that team, they know how to play the game right. They're not the biggest market. They don't have the wealthiest owner, but they somehow know how to win. And they've been winning on a near consistent basis since they went to the World Series in, was that 2008? 2008. So, and they've been back since. But it would be a shame to see them leave town. You know, and I hope for that city's sake that they find in some kind of way to resolve the stadium issues. I just don't.
What was the estimate on the damages? Like how much is it going to be completely rebuilt, or?
I think I read somewhere it's going to be about $56 million.
Yeah, $56 million to fix the Trop.
Yeah.
Well, that's cheaper than a new stadium, right?
It is, but normally, if Tropicana Field was either a brand new stadium or it wasn't constructed the way it was constructed, they wouldn't be in this mess. I think St. Petersburg and the Rays would be more than willing to chip in and fund it, but because it's such a dilapidated venue, and it has been since its inception, no one wants to fund renovations. The Rays want out. I don't think Tampa I don't think St. Petersburg wants to even keep, funding that facility because it was obsolete the day it was built. Like there are literal catwalks that are exposed. Like that's not a functional baseball facility. So neither side wants to fund replacement. And I think St. Petersburg legally has to, but they don't want to do that. And so that's why the Rays have been pushing so hard for a new stadium. One, because they don't want to play there anymore, and two, why would St. Petersburg doesn't want to do renovations on the stadium? So the next best thing is, well, let's get some kind of stadium deal done. And there are renders out of what it looks like. It looks like a nice facility, gaudy, too big in my opinion, but it is what it is. However, the Rays didn't want to play ball. So we're in this mess we're in now, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think, at least in the short term, they're staying in Tampa.
So I'm going to ask a question. It's not meant to be like some crazy hot take or,
Go for it.
But does baseball belong in Florida? It's tough. So obviously you have two teams there, right? You got Miami, you got Tampa. Those two teams last year in 24 were second and third to last behind Oakland in attendance.
Right.
And meanwhile, hockey is doing better in Florida than baseball is. Now, obviously that's partially because the Panthers and Lightning have had very good recent success, so it's easy to be a fan right now. But
also it's in a nice, cool environment in the middle of Florida.
Well, yeah, sure. But what do we think about baseball in Florida? Is it are the fans too fair weather for it to really work? Like in Miami, it's clearly not working because their team's not that good, and so the fans don't care. What do we think?
The Florida heat is pretty miserable.
Oh, sure.
But there are times of the year, like right now, when it's great baseball weather down there.
Sure.
Even earlier, because like my high school would every year they'd take a trip down to Florida because they'd play in all these tournaments when it was still like snow on the ground up here. They'd go down there to go play there. So like there should be a pretty big following down there. There's just not. Now it could be where they've got the stadiums, though. Like one of them is in Miami, but again, Miami has the problem of unless you're a hot ticket, like people in Miami just don't go to it. I mean, the same problem that the Dolphins have. It's the same problem
exactly
that Miami's struggling with right now.
Well, I also think it's this. Well, at least with the weather, both Lone Depot Park and Tropicana Field, they're both indoors for a reason. So it can't be that. I would say it, at least with the Marlins, it comes down to fielding a complete team. So back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the Marlins somehow won the World Series twice. Don't ask me how, they did. But each time, what the owner did, they had a fire sale the year after, and they just stunk. And what does that do? That kills any momentum that you have built up from winning on a consistent basis to growing the sport. And they haven't been the most competitive team since. Now, because of the demographics of South Florida, which is heavily Hispanic, and as we know, baseball definitely has drawn a lot of interest and
Cubans.
players, from Cubans, Venezuelans, Dominicans, which there's a big diaspora of that in the South Florida area. You'd think they draw well, but I think lack of on-the-field success has really stymied the Marlins. As far as the Rays, I think it's the location. Most of their fans are in Tampa. They're not in St. Petersburg. And if that team was in downtown Tampa, they'd be fine. I think it's for them, it's as
Probably.
simple as location. Because the Rays, like I said, they've been in the World Series twice. They field consistently good teams with the payroll that they have. So it's not an issue of they aren't good. It's more of, I think, it's a location issue. Like, no one wants to drive to St. Petersburg. That's a long drive.
It's also spending. Like, both teams are not spending at all. And it's one of the reasons why there's probably going to be a giant lockout next season, is teams like Tampa, Miami, Washington, Oakland don't spend a dime and aren't spending a dime in players. And why would you support a team that's not spending money to make your team better?
Well, but with the Rays, like you were saying, though, the Rays have had some success even with the relatively minor spending. At least when it comes to the Marlins, I still think that the problem is because it's in Miami and there's so much to do in Miami that, like, if you're looking for a relaxing day, your choice is go to the beach or watch baseball. Like, most people are going to pick the beach.
I mean, that argument, though, we can apply that to LA, which has the same kind of weather, and people go to Dodgers games. People go to Angels games, and the Angels haven't been relevant since 2002. And they have one of the best players in the league right now. So it can't simply be, oh, there's other stuff to do, because the Heat draw,
it's
the
easy.
Dolphins still draw.
There's still okay. So if you're in Miami and you want to get to a game,
Mhm.
like let's just ballpark how long it takes you to get there. Now, if you're in LA, just mentally ballpark. If you're in Inland Empire and you're wanting to go to the beach, first off, beaches in California aren't great. like compared to like no offense, California people, but like compared to the Gulf, that's a whole nother quality level of beaches. I mean, unless you're a surfer, and then it would go that route. But also, it takes you, an hour to go like 15 miles in LA. So if you're the one piece of entertainment that's within 30-minute drive of, like, but I don't know how big their stadium is, but 50,000 people or so, 50,000 fans, they could all make it there faster than it would take for them to go to the beach, depending on where that stadium is. So that could also be it. Plus, there's just a lot of people in LA. A lot.
Not what I've heard from Dodgers fans. It takes 2 to 3 hours to get into that stadium on nights, and 2 to 3 hours to leave.
How long does it take them to get from their house to the beach? Like that's or something else to do. And even then, because the California beaches ain't great. That would be like
There's
the
also
argument.
the money spending. There's also the money spending. The Dodgers
yeah, but
spend
like,
the most out of every team in the league.
yeah, but people don't care if their team's winning. You don't care if you're spending $1 bazillion or you're spending $5. Like that. Like, no one sits there and goes like, "Oh no, my team's going to the World Series, but I'm not going to support them." Why? Because they're paying minimum cap space right now. And it's like, no, nobody's like that when it comes to that. Now, if the product on the field is a good product, they're going to go, and you can start to build up a fan base that way, like what you were saying, and sustain it. But it sounds like the Rays have been putting out a good product, but maybe the population density isn't enough in that area to support the team, which very well could be, the location wise, which goes back to your statement about moving it to downtown Tampa. That would probably have a little bit better impact.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's where
well, the funny wrench in this whole story is what happened on Saturday, which was the Savannah Bananas came and played at the Bucks Stadium and sold it out. You had 65,000 people there to see, the baseball equivalent of like the Harlem Globetrotters, if you will,
Right.
And that was at the Bucks Stadium. 65,000 people watched baseball on a football-shaped field, which was hilarious, by the way. And you're right. Well, and obviously, like, spring training's there. Now, yeah, spring training is there because of weather, right? That's the reason it's there, but it does well in terms of, marketability as well, if you will. I know it does in Arizona as well, right? Both locations do well at spring training time because, the weather's great. It's It's a great time to get out and go watch some baseball and enjoy the sun. So it is. I don't know that the whole thing with the Bananas selling out the Buck Stadium on Saturday was kind of funny. It's like, well, the fans are in some form there, right? And it supports the idea of, if the stadium or if the team was more in Tampa Bay, then it might do better.
Yeah, see what happened is they took Field of Dreams literally and were just like, well, if we build the stadium wherever, the fans will come. It depends on how big of an inconvenience you are.
Yeah, I think they, from what I remember and what I've read, they originally built Tropicana Field to lure an MLB team, and I don't think they thought it would actually work, and it did. And so I don't believe there was any forethought into, well, maybe the fans would live more so in Tampa than actually St. Petersburg proper. And hindsight is 2020. I think if you ask them nowadays, the people who built that, they would have said, yeah, we should have put this in downtown Tampa or just on the outskirts where the majority of the population is in that area. The Marlins, though, listen, that's not a stadium issue. They're just not consistent enough.
I mean, the same thing happened to Miami football and with the University of Miami when they're being forced to use the Dolphin Stadium where it got moved. That's caused a big decline in their butts and seats ratio because it's so far away from campus, so you don't get the student pool. It is a trek if you are remotely connected to the university or downtown compared to everything else. And the Dolphins, they have hard times filling that stadium sometimes too. So, location.
I can see that. Yeah. No, I can understand it also playing a role as well. And I'm sure the Panthers have also faced some kind of attendance issues when they've had down years because Sunrise, Florida is not even close to downtown Miami. That's over by Fort Lauderdale, up near the Everglades.
Is there a big suburb sprawl area around it that it can pull from?
Yes, that entire area is basically endless suburbs.
I have one thing that probably it's been over almost 10 years, but probably still affects the Marlins this day was the death of Jose Fernandez. Like that team was up and coming, and they were at the time they had sold out stadiums all the time. It's when he died, they sold off everybody, and they've been in a slump and rebuilt ever since almost 8 years ago.
I don't know what it is with that team. They just love having fire sales. Because like I said, after every World Series appearance, they've had a fire sale, and it's bizarre that they do that. They don't want to seem to keep winning. At least there, I don't know the whole situation about what caused them to have a fire sale after Jose Fernandez died, but with the other two,
they also sold the team after that.
Well,
the team was sold in 2019, 2020.
That could have also played a role.
When Derek Jeter's group bought the.
I don't mind baseball. I think baseball is it's called the national pastime. I think that's a perfect definition for it. It's definitely a pastime, but it is interesting in ways that I don't find interesting, and that's okay.
Yeah, see, for me, I'm a bit dyslexic, so for me, it's the time of the past. Yeah,
that also works too.
But into something more exciting. Are you excited because we're in March?
Yeah, I mean, March is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best sports months of the year, primarily highlighted by the NCAA tournament and kind of the NBA really starting to figure out who's who when it comes to the playoffs. I think a lot of our talk of the NCAA tournament is coming up, so I'll save all of my thoughts and takes for that section. But this is a very underrated time to be paying attention to the NBA because we're really starting to see, who's who in terms of the teams, but not just the teams, but the players as well. We're starting to get our first look at early MVP candidates. I think one thing is going to be interesting in the MVP talk is if the idea of voter fatigue comes in again, because for all intents and purposes, it's Jokic and everyone else at this point. What he has done in terms of his impact on the Denver Nuggets hasn't really been matched by anyone other than, in my opinion, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in Oklahoma City. Thunder, obviously, best team in the West. I think they're back on a winning streak, back on a 3-game winning streak, only losing 12 games. So he has a really good argument for being the best player on the best team. But
okay, so you're gonna have to reveal now how much UConn's been paying you on the side to come here and talk up
What?
Joker.
I didn't pay. I mean, we did, Finn. To be fair, we did. Well, okay. I talked about this topic. I don't know what 3 weeks ago now, something like that.
yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, it's still early. I mean, we're just starting to have these conversations, and I mean, the I'm a big numbers don't lie guy, and the numbers aren't really lying. Where it's Shea and Jokic, and we'll see who else enters that conversation. There's always going to be Giannis in that conversation over in Milwaukee. Jason Tatum has his fan base that'll definitely advocate for him, but it's now starting to the field is starting to narrow down, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the last 20 to 30 games or so for all of these teams, and see what comes out of the MVP race. I'm not making any bold predictions now. It's just those are at the top right now, and we'll see where they fall over time.
I saw an interesting stat. It was about the most recent Mavs game. I can't remember who they're playing, but combined, there were over 20 players that were out on injury.
Yeah, their last game was
But
yesterday
it-
against
yeah,
the Sixers.
The Sixers,
And-
that's right. Yeah.
They are dangerously close to being the first team in NBA history to ever have to forfeit a game. And we've gotten close. There was a incident, it was actually an accident in the 50s where the Warriors were playing the Hawks, and the Hawks were in a very similar situation where they only had 6 guys able to play, and one of their last remaining player actually fouled out in overtime, but the coach subbed in the first player who fouled out into the game to actually finish the game. So technically that game finished, even though I believe the commissioner revoked the win and gave it back to Golden State because it was considered an invalid win because they
Yeah.
subbed in someone who technically fouled out. But we have technically not had a team have to forfeit games because of not having enough players. And unfortunately, I mean, this whole Mavs season has turned on its head, and it's, in my opinion, gone from funny to just sad, because things just get worse and worse for them. Obviously,
It
it'll
got
be
worse.
very, very interesting what the NBA does with the team that would have to forfeit games. But yeah, I mean, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel other than the end of this season for the Mavs fans right now. They are in a very uniquely bad situation that for as long as I've been paying attention to this league, I haven't seen and have no real comparison to. But yeah, you gotta feel for the Mavs fans, in my opinion.
They
Honestly,
did send AD to the G League to prep. So I guess he's
He's coming
thinking about
back.
coming back.
Oh no, they recalled him after one game.
Okay.
And I was gonna say, honestly, I'm shocked we didn't get closer to that forfeit during the whole COVID era. Just after when there were still restrictions. I want to say the year they came back, because there was a lot of players who unfortunately did test positive for COVID, and I know there were people who were sitting out games. So it's kind of shocking that we didn't get close to having forfeited games then.
Yeah, I mean, those COVID restrictions were strict. And they were testing everyone in and out, tracking everywhere they were going to make sure that if they came in contact, they went straight into, COVID protocol. But yeah, I mean, if there was any other time to get close to teams having to forfeit because of not having enough players, it would definitely be that. But yeah, the Mavs being in this unique situation have put them in quite a hole when it comes to availability.
I don't know if you guys saw too, related to that game that was being talked about, that Paul George is also out for the season now.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
He got some injections done and is out for the season.
Yep. They called him
Has he
for the
p-
season.
Has he played a full season? It feels like a combination of either Paul George or Kawhi Leonard have not played a full season. It just feels like whenever I see those two names, it's always about them getting injured. Like, am
I
I
believe-
crazy with that?
I'm pretty sure Paul George, when he was relatively new to the team on those Pacers teams with Danny Granger, that he would technically be playing the entire season, and as far as they went into the playoffs. But ever since he's been in a star position, whether that was in Oklahoma City or Los Angeles, before where he is now, you're right. It's always been a question of, is he going to be available for all 82 plus games of the season? Just one of those players where you kind of get a feel for what they could be if they were available the entire time, but that's just always going to be a question for him for basically the rest of his career. I think Kawhi is actually in a very similar position where he's a great player, but the best ability is availability, and that's always a question with those two players in particular.
So,
All
Finn,
right.
well, what do you
Let-
oh,
Go ahead.
no,
What's your
I was
question?
gonna ask him what he thought about Jimmy B over there.
I'm glad you asked, because my first hot take for this episode, I'm sure things are going to get fiery in the NCAA side of things, but in my opinion, of all of the craziness of the trade deadline at the end of the trade deadline this year, in terms of immediate impact, this trade was the most impactful trade in the league, even over Doncic going to Los Angeles. Now, I think Doncic being in LA is going to be a much longer longevity play, that the Lakers are not going to be irrelevant for at least the next half a decade. I mean, now there's rumors of LeBron staying to play with Bryce so he can be the first player to play with both of his sons. And part of that is a lot of the load has been taken off of him because Doncic is there to run the show. But in terms of immediate impact, I mean, I was talking about the numbers don't lie. The Warriors have been 14-1 with Butler in the lineup. And, the biggest argument against that is, who they played. And, their schedule hasn't been the strongest. They played the Bucks, the Mavs twice, the Rockets, the Kings twice, the Knicks twice, the Hornets twice, the Magic, and then the Sixers, where they actually did lose. Butler was in the lineup, so it's technically not being counted in the 14-1 with Butler. But that trade, for whatever reason, has completely turned the Warriors from a team that was scratching to get into the play-in to a team that is very well positioned to be in the playoffs coming down the stretch. I actually was going to say that they would have their first real test against Denver tonight, but they just reported that both Jamal Murray and Jokic aren't playing and Steph is. So I guess we'll have to wait till Milwaukee on Wednesday to see how they fare with a team with a pretty good pulse. But I think this is sustainable, and mainly because it hasn't been Butler himself. It's funny, the entire team has seemed to raise their level of play with him in the lineup. Ever since that trade happened, they're now the fifth ranked best offense and the best ranked defense, which I haven't heard the Warriors being the best ranked defense since their big championship runs with KD in the lineup. And one of the funnier things, especially just someone who watches anecdotally, we give SGA and even Luka a lot of crap for this, but Butler is a pretty decent foul baiter, and the free throw percentage for the team has gone up in volume and also gone up in percentage because he could get to the line and make his free throws. Another thing that has been also very interesting in a backwards kind of way, where it's another option offensively, which opens up a lot more opportunities for Steph. I mean, he was averaging 22.5, I believe, before the trade, and now in this recent stretch, it's north of 30. And not only that, the non-Steph minutes have gone back up to where, I mean, if you wanted to beat the Warriors, you would just wait till Steph was off the floor and put your best players in, because the non-Steph minutes were some of the statistically worst basketball in the league. And there's a lot of other smaller things. I think his dynamic with Draymond is also interesting. They're both getting along for now. Obviously, they've been winning. It'll be interesting to see how their dynamic in the locker room changes when they actually do face some adversity. But the team is also getting healthier. Kuminga's come back. Moses Moody has really stepped up his playmaking, I think partly due to Butler's tutelage in being in the relatively same position. But yeah, I mean, if the team stays healthy, that's always, a question with any team down the stretch. I think this is, sustainable. I don't think they're championship pedigree now. I think that's a little bit too hyperbolic, but them, fighting for that 6th, 5th seed is probably the ceiling that they want to shoot for. And even if they do fall back into the play-in, it's not going to be a scramble to win games. They're going to hold their own against the other teams that are down there. So that's why I'm kind of qualifying this as the most immediate impact for all the trades that have happened. It's been fascinating and, just as a fan personally, really fun to watch.
And now, excuse me. And now we're going to talk about the most wonderful part of sports, which is March Madness, baby.
Oh boy, yes.
So, first off, I have no idea what the committee was thinking with what they did to my poor Cardinals. But Louisville somehow being an 8 seed and then going up against Creighton of all freaking teams is just it's just a travesty to the sport.
They did John dirty.
I know, especially if you look down and look what they did to Kentucky. They basically gave Kentucky a path straight to the Sweet 16. That's ridiculous. Like I'm looking at it, it's like you could have made Kentucky played somebody. I mean, our record, yeah, they beat us, but like I think we've got more quadrant 1 wins than they do, and we at least made it to our conference tournament or championship. So like I don't know. I mean, I don't think Louisville's got what it takes to win it all this year, but we had built a team that should have made some noise. Like it looked like a pretty good Sweet 16 team. Potentially. I mean, against Duke, it's just outclassed in just terms of athletes and stuff. I mean, we've got a fantastic point guard. I mean, to be fair, we've got 3 guys I think on the bench. They're not bench. They're 3 guys that are sitting out because of injuries. So for doing as well as we've done, I've been quite happy, especially since we've managed to lose less games this year than total games we won last year.
I think outside of a certain team that we'll touch on later, everything that I'm seeing, it doesn't shock me at least when it comes to seeding wise. I do think some teams have an easier path to, at minimum, a Sweet 16 bid, like Drake. Whoever Drake draws, I think they'll easily make it to the Sweet 16. They have good matchups there until they face probably St. John's, and at that point, yeah.
You
Kentucky.
like that Missouri? You like that Missouri matchup for Drake?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
I do as well.
too.
I definitely do as well.
Okay.
Yes.
No, I'm fine with that. I know Missouri's like favored, but I'm feeling that same way.
Yeah, I think Drake is sneakily good. But teams out of the MVC, Missouri Valley Conference, are always highly underrated and sneakily good. Like they have an easy path. Kentucky, unfortunately, they'll be there. The team that I'm kind of worried about is Gonzaga. I don't know if they can beat Georgia, and that's probably a hot take. I think they could lose that match to Georgia in the first round. I was thinking about it yesterday after me and Eve had gotten done watching the Selection Sunday, and this Gonzaga team, it's not the team it's not as good as the teams that Mark Few has had in the past, but I don't like this matchup for them, and I think they could lose in the first round.
That's a coin flip for me. Yeah, Gonzaga and Georgia, that's a coin flip. I'm going to be erring on the side of pretty much all SEC teams outside of Kentucky and Florida are probably going to be eliminated by the end of the second round. But
I see Tennessee going a little bit further than what you're thinking. But
I also like Tennessee's matchup, especially early on. Assuming Kentucky plays well, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Tennessee to Kentucky that would be the Sweet 16, I believe.
Yep.
And then, who are they going to get in the Elite Eight? The favorite would be Houston, but that's assuming everything goes perfect for them. And I don't know. I don't think Purdue's all that good this year. I think Clemson is sneakily interesting. But I think Clemson actually got the spot that Louisville should have gotten. So I wouldn't be surprised if they peter out pretty early. McNeese is, they're a chaos agent. You never know what could happen with them. But
Will Wade, he knows how to coach them up.
yeah, that's one of those teams. That's one of those 12 seeds that you could see, playing in the Elite Eight very easily. But of all the SEC teams, other than Auburn, obviously, and Florida, I think those two teams are as good as advertised. Tennessee is pretty solid up and down the board. They're a very tournament ready team, and I would not be surprised if that shows up against some of their early tests, at least on their end of the Midwest.
See, I have problems with the bulk of the SEC floor. I've said this before. SEC, for the most part, does not know how to handle a high-paced defense. So something like a VCU, or even the way that Mick does things down in UCLA, I think that style of play is going to give the SEC teams fits, which is why I think we match it really well against Auburn. I mean, yeah, Auburn's got their defense, but I mean, I've been watching a ton of SEC basketball, and it's almost like you're watching it. If it was a YouTube video, you've slowed it down. That's what it looks like when I go from watching like Louisville play versus Georgia and I'm trying to think who the other team was. I think it was Texas, Georgia and Texas. I think we're playing, and like the gaps and the pacing and everything has to be set up exactly the way the play was supposed to go. They don't do a lot of free thinking on their own. There's not a lot of scrambling. There's not a lot of pressure that you're seeing that you would normally see in a lot of like the scrappy defense stuff. Now, Florida, on the other hand, does play that way, and that's why I think that they're going to go far. I think they're the most complete team when it comes to that, and I think they can handle a lot of that, and they've shown that they can. Kentucky, the only reason why I think they're going to go far is just because they've got kind of a cakewalk. That's really all it boils down to. If you made Kentucky, and stuck them in like the 5th seed where Clemson's at, which I think is really where they belonged, but they won't ever get there because it's Kentucky. They would have had a much harder time getting out of that bracket. I would have preferred Florida and Houston to swap their number ones. So I think that would have made things a little bit more interesting. Instead, I have a good feeling that we're going to see, at least based off of this, unless UConn decides they're going to do something special, it'll end up being St. John's and Florida competing to see which one of them gets to go to the Final Four. And that'll be a game. Unless Pitino has an off game against somebody, but I don't see that on that list. I mean, I know people are chomping at the bit for the Calipari-Pitino rematch down there after the Kansas game, but
Yeah.
I don't see Calipari getting past even a wounded Bill Self. I think Bill's just a way better coach than Calipari.
Oh, of course. You know my feelings on him, on Calipari. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, go ahead.
No, I'm going to change the topic a little bit so you can
Oh,
I'm
I'm staying on. I'm staying on the tournament.
Well, no, I am too, but I mean a different team.
Yeah, I was just going through my bracket here. I was looking at it. Uh, yeah, Alabama's got a little Bobby Morris. I think they'll beat them. I think St. Mary's is going to be a problem for Alabama. They'll probably just muscle through that. Okay. And then that's when things are going to get really spicy and interesting, depending on who gets past. If VCU makes it to fight Alabama, I could see VCU easily beating Alabama. I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, well, Red, you're a big giant SEC hater. I mean, yes, and we'll get to
Wait.
that, but I can also respect game when I see game. Like Florida's playing really good ball, like really, really good ball, and I think that they are, they belonged in the tournament. Absolutely, they had a number one seed, probably. Auburn, they've handled their schedule well. I haven't seen anything that's screamed at me that they're going to do amazing. Like they have weaknesses, and it shows. But it's a Bruce Pearl team, and he tends to have a little bit of weaknesses in the way that he does basketball, and that's normal. And that goes back to Tennessee, where it's Rich Barnes, and he has made a career out of looking good up till about February. That's what he did in Texas for years. And he'd be a number one in the rankings, going into Christmas, and his teams would just kind of fall apart in the second half of the year, where most teams are getting significantly better. So I have issues with the way Tennessee plays, and it almost feels like that he's just kind of there. And that's why I think that there's a good chance that they potentially might not make it out of that bracket. But then on the other side of the coin, over here with the Duke area, back to that. I mean, as long as Cooper is healthy, like I think they're going to be good. They're going to be tough, and I hate saying that. Like it pains me to say that. I hate Duke, but they're also a complete team ish with a big asterisk of like, yeah, it's all hinging on one person. But even when he was out, they were still a pretty freaking good team. I mean, we saw that against Louisville in the ACC tournament. So
Yeah, they were fine. I mean, they were fine. They were fine without him. I mean, I think he's expected to be back, but for that first game. But
even so, it kind of underscores your point. I'm looking at the east side of the bracket, and I share your sentiment on Alabama getting an interesting matchup with VCU. But barring those two teams, I mean, Arizona's solid, but they're not the Arizona of the past couple years. Oregon is one of those teams to look out for. If they get hot, they can beat anyone, but that is contingent on them shooting well. And I think Duke's defense can scheme against that pretty well. St. Mary's is also interesting. I'm not sold on Wisconsin. As someone who watches a lot of Big Ten basketball, I'm not sold on the 3 seed that Wisconsin has. So yeah, I mean, they're good, and that's definitely going to show. But even then, even all the way up to the Elite Eight, they're each game is going to be definitely tougher for them, but I think they'll be handling it just fine with or without flag. I mean, they get flag back, and that's it just adds that extra oomph that Duke team already has. But yeah, that number 1 seed was definitely earned.
Yeah, Liberty can be problematic, and the Zips are doing.
Akron Zips, yeah.
Oh,
Liberty.
they're like the problem is that there are so many good matchups this year. Like last year, I could sit here and look at this thing and be like, they're gonna win. They're gonna win. They're not making it past this. And I was, I'll tell you, like last year, I was 99.7%. I think is what it was by the Sweet 16. Like that was what my bracket was. And then after that, it all fell apart because I lost faith in UConn. Because I thought that UConn would match up unfavorably, and I think it came down to like 1 point or something stupid. I was so angry
Yeah, fun.
on their trap game. But this year, first off, we get a ton of really great matchups that I absolutely love. But the problem is like the problem with that is I can't tell you how good it's going to be on the bracket because it's going to hurt.
Yeah, if I could, real quick. If I'm Oregon, I watched Liberty's going to be a dangerous team. They are looking at NCAA stats. They are 6th in the nation in 3-point shooting percentage. So if they shoot as well as they have all season, they're going to be a problem in that first round matchup. And if I could jump down to the top of the Midwest real quick, there are 2 teams that I'm looking at right now, and they're both mid-major teams, High Point and McNeese. There is a universe out there where one of them is in the Sweet 16, and potentially, and I lean more towards McNeese simply because I trust Will Wade as a coach, where if they get hot, you could see him in the Elite Eight. Like, there's a conceivable universe where that happens. So if I was a betting man, and I'm not saying to place bets on this, I have to clarify that. I do think either High Point or McNeese, pencil them in the Sweet 16, and don't be surprised if one of them is in the Elite Eight this year.
That is also my upset pick for the Midwest.
That
I have
also
them
means
petering out against Houston, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that also means I don't trust Houston, and I have never trusted Houston as a college basketball team whenever they're in the tournament.
Yeah, because like last year, I picked them to win it all, and like it bit me in the butt. So yeah, I see it's why I really hate that Kentucky got to be down there, because I think they match up really well against everything down there outside of UCLA. I think UCLA potentially could give Kentucky some problems. And it's same thing though. Is UCLA is built in a way, and they're coached in a way that they could potentially also upset Tennessee. Like I think that's where my gut is telling me on that. But UCLA has to get past Tennessee in order for the matchup with the Kentucky. So, you know, do they make it happen? I don't know. That's probably the route that I'm going.
Speaking of sneaky 12 seeds, it pains me to talk about them as a lifelong Buffs fan. But one of the most exciting teams coming into this tournament is Colorado State. And they're riding a 10-game win streak right now. They just won the Mountain West Conference. They're favored as the 12 seed. They're favored to beat Memphis. And then
it's Memphis State.
And then in theory, we got you got a matchup with size Maryland over there. And I don't see Colorado State going if they happen to get to the Sweet 16, right, and then match up against Florida, they won't win that. I don't see that happening. But I'm eager to see what happens with them because they're riding really hot right now.
You think Colorado State can beat Maryland?
That's a take.
Yeah, no, I it's kind of one of those things of like, if they get hot, they could. I don't think just naturally no. If they do, it'd be they got hot, they got lucky, whatever. So no, I don't see them beating Maryland. But who knows?
That's if they play Maryland. Well, I would not sleep too hard on GCU.
Thank you.
Because if GCU's one of those first round teams that loves that plays a way that big schools from big conferences don't really see all that often. We saw I forgot who they played against last year, because I was at that game in Spokane where they beat their first round matchup. But I don't like, or I think GCU is actually in a similar spot where Colorado State is, where if they get past Maryland, I also think they're going to peter out. Well, I'll save my big upset for later. But I think GCU and Colorado State are both the two fun teams to watch down in the West, just because of their first round matchup. And I think it's very similar to Colorado State, where they're just one of those teams that is just they don't fear anybody, and they play like they don't fear anybody, and they're decently well coached. They always have just a guy that they can always give it to down the stretch, and he can get a bucket for himself. So yeah, just keep an eye on GCU making things interesting early.
I mean,
Sure, that'd be interesting if we saw that 12 and 13 both and then go up against each other.
it's not shocking. GCU has had really good coaching since they came into D1 with Dan Majerle and now Bryce Drew, brother of Scott Drew, the coach of the Baylor Bears, and of course, son of Homer Drew, who coached Valparaiso. If you remember that shot that Bryce took to beat Ole Miss years ago.
Yeah, and their grandmother was Nancy Drew. Used to solve a lot of
Is that
mysteries.
seriously?
Wow, Rad.
No, I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
I was gonna let that slide, but
That was
I thought you were serious for a second. It's like, wow. But coaching is in the Drew blood, and I think they're a very well coached team. Okay, taking off my Homer glasses, because it is my alma mater. Do I think there's a shot they beat Maryland? Yes, I do think there's a shot. Of course, if anything, there's a shot. Would I be shocked if it happens?
Yes.
Yes, I would. With this Maryland team, yes, because this is a team that's capable of going to the Final Four. Yes, I would be incredibly shocked if they beat Maryland. But they're a fun team to watch. So, as much as it pains me to say, so I look forward to watching that game when it goes down. But I'm confident Maryland will win.
Yeah, I mean, if it was anybody else, I would be right there. I mean, again, I wouldn't be. It wouldn't shock me that GCU beats them and then makes a decent enough run. But me and Vegas, I guess, both seem to agree that Maryland, and it was the Crab Five. Isn't that what they're calling them?
That's what we're calling us. That's so cringy. Oh my god.
I don't
I'm
hate it.
sorry.
I don't
I
hate
the
it.
Fab Five from
That's
Michigan.
So listen, this is the best team we've had since we won it in 2002. It's been a while. Even when we had Diamond Stone and that team, just completely imploded because Mark Turgeon is a horrible coach. Yeah, this is the best team we've had in. God, has it really been 20 plus years? Oh my god. Yeah, it's been a while. So it would not shock me if we make it to a Final Four. I don't know if we're good enough to win the title, but I'm saying Final Four or bust. Like that's my bar. Like this is the year.
Back up to the South. The thing that's crazy is that if we somehow get the Little Creighton game, I can't tell you how that's gonna go. I mean, my heart tells me that like we're gonna beat it, but like my gut's like, well, I have no idea. But both of those teams are gonna give Auburn fits because of the way that they play basketball. And I don't see Auburn getting past the winner of that game unless there's like injuries or we've got issues where people are just not hitting threes.
Mhm.
But just below that, you got Michigan, which I think that's also one that Vegas doesn't agree on as a close matchup, which is crazy because it's a 5th seed versus a 12 seed, and like that should be a pretty easy decision. But
San
no.
Diego's also fun to watch too.
Yeah, UCSD is my chaos agent, where I have them in the Elite Eight because you need to choose a team that does something crazy. But
NC State was mine last year.
putting that aside, because that's no one can predict that. I like that matchup for UCSD against Michigan, honestly. I think Michigan's good. I think Michigan's very well balanced. But UC San Diego is just one of those teams where they're riding in a hot streak, coming out of their conference down there, and they're playing a Michigan team that struggled against Maryland in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, that was a good game, and that could have gone either way, if I'm honest. It's always the last game before the bracket drops. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's just my hate against Michigan as well, but I really like that UC San Diego team, just in terms of how they play. Another just well-coached team, and they're going to give Michigan problems. It'll be fun to watch. That's my favorite game of the first round, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the fan in me is going, man, it'd be great to get a rematch of Louisville versus Michigan, from that, from the 2013 tournament, national championship game. That'd be great in the Elite Eight. I think that's Elite Eight. Let's see. No, it'd be Sweet 16. Yeah. But again, like UC San Diego, that would be one that, like, if you had them beating Michigan, I would not be like, oh, you're crazy. Now, right below that, you got old money versus oil money.
Oh boy.
So Texas
That's a
A&M
good
versus
one.
Yale. And Vegas really thinks Texas A&M has got Yale on the ropes, but I don't know.
Yeah, I always say watch out for the Ivy League teams. Like, there were years where Tommy Abaker had Harvard like looking really good, but people underestimate them because it's the Ivy League. How good can they be? Well, they're ranked the way they are for a reason. I wouldn't underestimate Yale. So Bulldogs might give some fits. Might give Texas A&M some fits. So
Yeah, let's see. Did they have any quad one wins?
I can
They're
actually
the
look
only
that up
Ivy League,
right
aren't
now.
they, this year?
I think they
Yeah.
are, and it's not
Yeah,
like
they're the
Yale
only one.
hasn't. It's not like Yale hasn't done it before. I was at the game where they beat Auburn last year in Spokane, and it was pretty convincing. Now, they lost the nightcap against San Diego State afterwards, but that was just more of it was actually a height and a talent thing. But it's not like Yale hasn't been here before. They know how to play in this tournament. And yeah, it's you can't disregard the Ivy Leagues anymore. I think you haven't been able to for a while now, but the past couple years, that whoever, usually it's a couple. I think it's just one this year. I think Yale's the only one. But yeah, that team against Texas, or that game against Texas A&M, will be very, very interesting at the very least.
So
I do remember watching that Yale game last year. That was a fun one.
So to answer your question, Yale has a net rating of 72. They don't have a quad one win. They have a loss, 84-92. So a really good loss against Purdue, who was 13 at the time.
They got a quality win. The Zips.
Yeah, that's good.
They did hit
Like
a
it.
really good win though, a quad two versus Akron, who is, as we know, a 13.
They made a tournament. That's a tournament win. So, like, it's not like they're not getting any tournament wins. So, let's see, what else did I had pull up? I had their whole thing pulled up here. Yeah, I mean, they're beating up on the nerds. I mean, that's the whole back part of it. And because they went on a streak, everybody except for Harvard. And they lost the one at Harvard, which versus their first game against Harvard. That doesn't smell right, but it was at Harvard, so you know how that goes. So they're definitely a team that can keep a number 4 seed busy.
Yeah, I think they got a shot to,
It would be fun. It would.
Yeah.
I would
It's
laugh.
just hard to make lightning strike twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then is little Richard Pitino, is he coaching New Mexico right now? Who's coaching? Where's he at?
Mexico. Let's see.
Yep, it's still Richard
Yep.
Pitino.
Wow, still there.
Yeah, it is. I also like that. I think it'll be a good game against Marquette.
Yeah, how long's he been at New Mexico?
4 years. Got there in 2021.
I mean, he's gone back in the tournament again.
I think New Mexico is also one of those fun tournament teams that always kind of they've been known to cause some chaos.
I would just like for once for the committee just to put Rich up against his dad. Just so because then the question is like, what kind of smackdown do you put on your own son? Because knowing Rick would be like, look, I gotta make a statement here.
Oh yeah, you don't want to lose to your son, right?
Yeah.
Did we talk at all about what we think about Michigan State?
Oh, that was the
We
next thing. Is
haven't.
I'm moving down that list there.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd love for Marquette to get past New Mexico. Patino's dad always had problems with Izzo. So I don't know how well he'd do against Michigan State. I think Marquette's a little bit better of a matchup against Michigan State, but
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I
what do
probably
we
agree
think?
with that.
What do we think about the Sparties?
In one of my brackets, I have them winning it all. So I'm probably going to regret that. Because every time I bet on Tom Izzo, he lets me down.
He's usually good for like a Sweet 16 or Elite 8.
Listen,
Yeah,
they haven't won since 2000.
Michigan
I
State-
don't know if it wouldn't happen this year.
They're one of those teams that looks perfect on paper. Where when you put this tournament into a computer, they're probably going to come out winning a majority of the time, or at least in the Elite Eight, Final Four. But we've kind of alluded to it already. There's always something that happens when we start to move locations into the Elite Eight and even in the Final Four if they make it that far, where from a winning it all standpoint, there something always happens from preventing them. It's not a bad pick to choose them to win it all. Again, statistically, everything is there. The wins are there. The quad one wins are there, and even their matchup in the South, even up to the Elite Eight, is pretty favorable. But it's hard. One of those teams is just hard to trust winning it all.
Well, I mean, back to. I mean, this is part of my rant against the SEC, right? Is that they're hanging their hats on what they did early in the season. So when you look at Michigan State, right? So they're a 2 seed now. Earlier this season, they lost to Kansas and they lost to Memphis. Now, the reason why they didn't get dinged very hard with the Kansas loss is because at the time Kansas was ranked number 1. Well, Kansas isn't
Right.
even ranked right now. So,
Right.
it. Are we seeing a Tom Izzo team that, hey, they got better, which kind of looks like they did, but then there's this big roadblock in the middle here where, again, UCLA shows up and manages to squeak out a win against them. Indiana goes and fires their head coach, and they go out and they win against them. There's the Big Ten basketball is kind of a mess.
It is.
And I get, okay, Tom Izzo he's a great coach in March and stuff, and he does well. He'll get you to a Sweet 16 or Elite 8. But I'm looking at this, like what they last done. I mean, they got knocked out by Wisconsin.
And that's after losing to them at home. I mean, it's one thing to lose in a neutral site, but to oh no, they beat them at home. I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah, they lost it in the tournament, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think they play. They did beat them. Yeah, they did beat them at home. They lost they lost to Indiana at home. That's who you're thinking.
Yes, wrong red team.
Yeah, and then they don't travel well, based off of what I'm seeing here about the loss at USC and UCLA, because those are some long flights. So where are they playing? Do you know?
They're in the South. I think the South's first round location.
Well, it depends, because it's kind of a
bunch
mess.
spots. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know in Lexington we're playing in Lexington, which that's basically a home game for us. That also helps us against Creighton.
Funny, one team that was briefly mentioned there is Kansas. I don't know what they're gonna do. They just had such a roller coaster of a season that I have no idea what to expect from them.
Oh, that one's easy. They're gonna lose to St. John's.
You think so right away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're
Not
they're
right
gonna
away, but I mean after Arkansas.
they're gonna beat Calamari,
Yeah.
and then after they beat Calamari, then they're going to lose to Patino.
You call him calamari?
That's not the first I've heard of that.
Oh god. It's just so I don't know about I mean they beat Michigan.
You've seen his hair,
State.
right? He's got more ink in his hair.
It's seen his hair. I know.
It's like Kansas beat Michigan State, they beat Duke, they beat Iowa State, they lost twice to Houston. That's not a huge surprise, and then they beat Arizona. And then lose to like Utah, and I'm like I don't know. I really don't know.
And BYU, they don't like the state of Utah.
No, they lost to BYU. They lost right. Like I just don't know. I don't know what to. I guess we'll see what Kansas does. But you're right. They probably beat Arkansas and then that's it. But what a weird year for Kansas.
Yeah. So the Sparties, they're playing in looks like Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland.
That's
Yep.
pretty easy then.
That's a short drive.
Yep.
Yeah. So it'd be UNC that'd be the play-in game, right? Or is it the Alabama State? No, it's UNC.
Yeah.
It'll be UNC versus Ole Miss, which I think that's the favorable matchup for UNC.
Oh God.
Speaking of which, should we roll into all the
We
controversies
absolutely
soon?
We've been holding off.
should.
Oh,
Because like
boy.
I mean I've already dogged on the SEC enough in 2 episodes. Or no, I haven't. But
Why are
no,
you- Why are
What-
you
go ahead.
dogging on the Why are you dogging on the Securities and Exchange Commission? What have they done to you?
God, sigh.
I mean, to be fair, they helped me with my bracket last year because all I did was just if it became a toss up and one of them was an SEC team, just assume they're going to lose.
My God.
That's what worked for me so well last year.
The hate is generational. Good Lord.
Wait, oh, you have no idea. Well, there's a reason why I'm blue yet I'm still called red.
So UNC and this whole thing with West Virginia.
And IU, because I'm throwing IU in there
IU.
too, because IU
Yeah.
had an equally the good. Actually, if you compared, there's 3 things that need to be addressed in this UNC thing. First off, if you compare resumes, West Virginia and IU had better resumes in terms of quad 1, quad
Okay.
2.
Yeah, in terms of the wins, yes.
Yeah, and then UNC had some bad, the quad 2 or quad 3 losses.
So UNC's was 7-1 in quad 3, 6-0 in quad 4, 8-0 in quad 2. They went 1-12 in quad 1.
1-12.
Yes. And they only
What
beat
record, but-
UCLA. They
At a
only
neutral
beat-
site. So it's not like they
UCLA.
had to travel.
Yeah.
Oh
by
yeah, they did.
2 points.
And early in the year.
Yes.
Yeah, it was right.
And they've had some bad losses against some of these quad 1 teams. Like, really bad.
Yeah, because mix a bit like how Pitino's system is, and it takes a while for that system to just get chugging along. So I can
don't
definitely
know.
see them. But
It's-
versus like West Virginia, which had some pretty good wins, and then also didn't have any
had
of the embarrassing
6.
losses.
They had 6 quad 1 wins. Well, they had an embarrassing loss to end their season when they lost to Colorado that had won 3 conference games.
I think their most embarrassing quad 1 loss was at Pitt. 86-62.
Who UNC also lost to.
Yeah.
And that's a rivalry game.
Yeah.
So like you can't put much into a rivalry game loss.
Well, we can't, but that's their most embarrassing. Otherwise, every other loss has been pretty respectable. I mean,
Yeah.
75, 56 at Arizona, but they were at 12 at the time for net. So I mean, like you look at the resumes and just with the eye test for both Indiana and West Virginia, they're better than North Carolina.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, I mean West Virginia really just got they were kind of a fringe team, and then to lose in the second round to Colorado, I don't know. I mean that loss was just not the one to take.
Yeah, but like it's in the tournament, and so like you can forgive a loss in the tournament because the team is playing for their life in a tournament, right? Like I mean, you think about like
Yeah.
like you North Carolina State last year, they just started winning and then couldn't stop because if they stopped, their season was over.
Right.
So they won the ACC tournament. They came in at like 11 seed, and then they made it deep, like wasn't it like Elite Eight or something?
NC State last year? Yeah, they were in the
Yeah,
Final
yeah.
Four.
Because I had them going like, I had them going crazy deep. I think they may have been my only team that I had in the Final Four. I can't remember. But like that was the one that everyone was like, "Oh, they busted my bracket." I was like, "Dude, that was the easiest bet you could do." If you watch the way that they just turned it on at the end and they just went crazy.
That was the DJ Burns team, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
and they were fun to watch too.
They actually fired their coach this year.
I know, and it was like,
they did. I saw that.
yeah, which is crazy because like they had such a good run last year. Now, granted, they didn't do much this year, but then, you know, they fired him before the ACC tournament, which was kind of like, are you trying to say don't do that again? Because like maybe he was ready to go.
Well, in in NC State defense, the previous years under that coach, they didn't really do anything. So this was kind of like that fluke season, and then so I can see why they kind of did what they did, but still, it's a little weird to fire a coach who took you to the Final Four when nobody expected you to get that far to begin with.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
I do think.
Go ahead.
No, I do think it's hilarious that the governor of West Virginia is speaking out about this.
I mean, to be fair, he does have a little bit because this was the other part that I wanted to get to. So, Bubba, which I believe is his actual real name, who is I think he's the chairman for the NCAA tournament.
Bubba Cunningham, the AD of North Carolina.
Yeah. It's set to receive, it's like $105,000 bonus.
Yes, I did see
if UNC makes it to the tournament.
I did see this.
And
conflict of interest.
It's supposedly he left while they were making the decision, but like if he's buddy with the little selection team guys, they're like, well, do you want to make Bubba or Boss not get his $100,000?
And that whole explanation they gave the vice chair.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying the whole explanation the vice chair gave, like that man should be a politician because he dodged the question that Seth Davis was asking him. Like he asked him point blank, well, was there conflict of interest because Bubba Cunningham, the AD of North Carolina, he's like, well, blah 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 blah. He didn't even touch the question. And then he finished it up.
Oh, yeah, the big question that he dodged when it goes, all right, so how did UNC compare against IU in West Virginia? Like, what was it that stood out for you? And it was, well, we just wanted to go ahead and say that everybody played a great season. And we wish we had more spots to put more people in. But like this is the field that we've got. We tried a bunch of different brackets. This is the field we got, which completely didn't answer the question. It's like, what was it about UNC's resume that made you go, they definitely deserve in as opposed to these other two teams?
But what really made me upset was it was a Jordan Travis moment. For all those who don't remember, Florida State, a couple years ago, Jordan Travis got injured, and that's the primary reason why they were left out of the CFP. It's this again.
No,
Tucker,
that was the stated reason. They were already
Well-
conspiring to leave them out.
well, yeah, but this time around for basketball, Tucker DeVries, who is a guard for West Virginia,
Yeah, the star.
yes, and they stated to the nation that's why we left them out. Tucker DeVries was injured.
Right,
The man
he's
hasn't
injured.
played since December. That's not a good justification for leaving the team out. That's a horrible justification.
That's a very interesting parallel too, because if I remember correctly, one of the officials in Florida also sued the NCAA football committee for leaving them out, stating very similar reasons. So it's funny how both of those two situations have very similar, on paper parallels, but something going on in the background that's a little bit more shady than it rather should be in both football, and now we're seeing it in basketball as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they,
the whole
Go ahead.
star player. No, that the Tucker thing with player availability is what we cared about, and that's why we I don't know.
if anything, this has to reinforce the going forward that ADs cannot be a part of the committee. Like they just can't.
Sure.
There's too much conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
Like they care so much about the integrity of the game. Well, where's the transparency and integrity when you have the AD of a high-profile school as the chairman of a committee that's deciding on whether the school that he currently oversees, the athletic, as the athletic director, gets into the tournament? Like that's a huge conflict of interest. And miss me with the whole, oh, he was outside of the room. No, he wasn't. I think that's BS. Pardon my French. I think that's BS. And you expect us to believe that. And like we're gonna take your word for it.
Yeah, I was like I was saying earlier, I was having a laugh that the West Virginia governor is involved or cares. I mean, I guess it's I don't know what they got going on in
I was
West
just about to say,
Virginia.
what else are they
No
doing down
offense.
there?
No
No.
offense, what else are they doing over there? But it is funny that the governor is involved, and he's like, and like the attorney general's like investigating like how they make these decisions or whatever. I mean, I don't know why the governor of the state, needs to care, but no, it's I mean, it's questionable at best, but it's just kind of a bit funny that that's where we're at.
And of course, everybody's ignoring IU, and I appreciate that.
No, that's fine. I mean, IU was there. I mean, they mentioned Ohio State as well and Boise State. As they didn't have the same. They weren't quite there with
Yeah.
with
I
IU and West Virginia, but they were. They tried to bring more schools into being like, oh, we're thinking about all these, and it's
Well,
UNC is just the one.
Their official last four out were, it was IU, West Virginia, Boise State,
And Ohio State.
and
Ohio State. Yeah.
Which Ohio State, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think West Virginia's overall resume was enough above Indiana, where sure Indiana deserved to be also in that conversation, but if there was any snub of those four, by far West Virginia was the one that should have slotted in, and probably would have, because wasn't there that thing in the ACC championship where if Memphis or if UAB won that championship, both of them would have made it in, and North Carolina would be the first four out anyway. So it was
Yeah,
already
that's what they
fluky
said.
that
Yeah.
they were let in, and then even after that happened, they still slid them in despite looking at the two respective teams' resumes. Is just there's always a problem with who they leave out, but this one to me is more glaring than usual.
Sure.
Yeah,
I do wonder if they beat Colorado and then lost to Houston like Colorado did. I wonder if just beating Colorado and having that one more win, it would have been fine.
Who knows? I don't know.
Like Red, you were saying, I understand. Like Colorado, everyone's playing. It's the conference champion or conference tournament, so they're all playing to survive, and so everyone's playing their hardest. But You know, it's like if they just beat Colorado and then lost to Houston, would it have been fine for them?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I mean the other part too is like I'm also like still angry about Louisville being an 8 seed too because I was like sitting here staring at a bunch of 4 seeds going like you don't deserve to be here either, like Arizona. Yeah, like, I'm looking at Arizona's record versus Louisville's record. I'm thinking like, I'd take that trade. Yeah, there's I don't know. There was a couple of big misses for sure this year in the tournament, and North Carolina doesn't deserve to be in it. But I think that if they can get past San Diego State, which I reckon they can, they're actually going to make a little bit of noise because they got to go up against Old Miss, which that'll be a cakewalk. Because again,
the other
they were just selected like random SEC teams. So just like, how can we make the record? Well, let's just pick all these because like that's the other part. So let's just be fair. Is there are SEC teams that don't belong in this tournament? It's like everyone's mad at North Carolina, but it's like, hey, they just did this so that they could please ESPN, who's constantly talking about how great the SEC is. There are teams on here that have no business being in this tournament that are SEC teams.
Vanderbilt. Yeah, that it's I don't know. I mean, and the other argument I've kind of heard or saw was like, you know, UNC should be there because UNC's always there and they're like part of the tournament and they're like good. They're like good for the tournament. You know,
it's a brand name.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that's why Kentucky's a 3 seed.
Sure.
I mean, I think
they're just one of those teams that's there. Like they're always there and they're just part of the fabric of the champion or of the tournament, you know.
like we run into this a lot with the college football football playoff. Like
sure. We've had the same discussion already, right?
Like it's also about branding. Like people don't want to admit it, but they also care about TV, the eyeballs. Like sorry to say, but certain teams from certain conferences just bring the eyeballs, and it's unfortunate that has to play a role, but it does.
Yeah, I mean, this tournament is a product. We are consumers of a product, and if you're running a business, you want to put your best foot forward in your biggest and best flagship product. So there's, that's always going to be a factor, unfortunately, that goes into the decision-making process for some of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, there's also Texas, right? So that was one that probably should have gone for West Virginia, but didn't because of money. That's the only thing that makes sense. Because I don't think they've done anything. I mean, they were 6-12 in the SEC play.
Ew.
Yeah, I think all he did was lose the entire back half of the season. Lost to Ohio State, so there you go. Lost to UConn.
You think there should be a limit to the amount of teams a conference gets in? That way, we expand the field for more mid majors and smaller schools.
I mean, that's a good question. It depends, and it really depends on their overall record. I mean, I already have problems with people that only win 19 games getting in. But I could see some justification for it, that they should at least, it depends on how bad those those other losses are. Like, if half your losses are to like in an old school Big East time period when, the top 5 of the top 10 were all Big East teams and you had to play them twice. Okay, I can understand how you got 10 losses. When there's 5 teams that are Final Four caliber teams that you have to go up against. Okay, I get it. I can forgive that. But what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing here with Texas, it's you don't belong.
Well, the problem is, and this will, I guess, lead into our next topic. For schools like Texas and a few other blue bloods, it's like NCAA or bust. They don't consider the NIT worthy of them, and of course, they're never going to consider the CBI or the Crown, as it's called. So for schools like that,
I hate that rebrand.
NCAA or but I do too. But yeah, for schools like Texas and some other ones, it's NCAA or bust. Like that's what they're
Yeah,
focused.
it is funny on that note that Colorado is in the crown. They're the number one seed, and I saw the Buff social media on it, and I was like, oh, it's gross.
You guys gonna hang a banner if you win? Penn State
Oh,
has
yeah,
3 NIT banners
Crown,
hung up in our basketball arena.
Crown tournament. I think we have an NIT banner too, because I think we have one up.
Oh, we have one up.
I mean, well, to be fair, as we discussed on here back in the day, the NIT meant a lot. So
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, we discussed that too because it was back. Was it the NCAA refused to segregate or refused to desegregate?
Integrate. I
Yeah.
believe so. Yeah, that was when the NIT was because you had teams who would skip the NCAA tournament because the NIT was more prestigious
Yes.
than that. So yeah, that was way back in the day. Then
Yeah, because nobody wanted to go play the likes of Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it used to be.
Adolph Rupp.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be a thing.
Yeah, it did.
I'm trying to find our NIT record, but like it's all been scrubbed. They're all hiding it.
But the NIT's had a rough go of it so far. They had to tell South Alabama to
I saw that. Yeah,
they can't come play with them.
I'm curious. I'm curious what you guys think. Whose fault that is? Because like it's obvious that the NIT's hands were strung here, where you have a team that said, okay, we're not going to. I think it was UC Riverside that said, okay, we're not going to go. They committed to the CBI, and then once they realized that they qualified for the CBI, they decommitted and tried to get back into the NIT. And NIT let them back in. So I don't know. I think there's a little bit of blame on the CBI too for letting them go. Where if you've committed to play your tournament, realize that you have an opportunity at another one post commit, and just letting them go is, to me, that is interesting and almost not. It's not as damning, but is almost as bad as NIT having to basically make someone disappointed. And they chose to kick South Alabama out in favor for UCR.
Awful situation all around because I know those kids really wanted to continue their season a little bit longer, and you have this whole nightmare of a mess between UCR and then add into the CBI and NIT not being on the same page with everything. It's just I feel sorry for them first and foremost. I'm not sure how you can rectify that situation though. Can they put South Alabama in? Like, how do you fix that?
It just makes it an odd number, and it's like you can't.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you add another team, but then that completely changes what the NIT tournament is. So whoever wins it will have an asterisk next to it, and there's all these cascading effects that'll probably happen. So I'm sure at such a last minute, this tournament time, it's not like we have time to think about this.
Yeah, that's
they made a call, and they'll live with the decision.
I was getting ready to jump in there. Like the NIT though, and like playing those extra games. If you're building a program and you've got a bad year and you didn't quite make the tournament before NIL, that was a great way to launch your next couple of seasons and build those teams. Because I was going through like Louisville's record, like the last 2 times that we went the NIT, and the next year we went second round out at the in the NCAA, followed by an Elite 8 run. And that kind of tracks with every single time that we go through that cycle. It's extra play time, it's extra coaching, it's extra time to continue to develop your team. Now though, with NIL, if you don't got the budget to keep them, which these bigger schools should be able to keep that team together. Now, maybe they're going the fire sale route with like, these pieces didn't work for me, I'm going to build all over again. And sometimes that works. We just did that, right? Like we went from winning 8 games last year and getting buying a whole new team in the portal and now we're 27-7. But like if you've got a team that you're able to keep together, mostly this is critical play time. It's just like they were talking about like bowl games. It's like, yeah, even if I go to a crappy bowl game, if I'm trying to build a football team to compete next year, these extra practices are critical for that success because
Absolutely.
you're trying to get ahead of next year. You're trying to get some of that advanced stuff in place. And you're not going out there to do practice because it's fun. You're going out there to develop and work on folks. And if you're in these tournaments, if you can keep playing, that's a whole extra month of free conditioning you're getting on all of this. So it's stupid for these teams to act like, oh, I'm too good to go to the NIT. It's like, look, Louisville went to the NIT. We made a deep run. We kept practicing. And that was a Rick Pitino coached twice. Rick Pitino coached team that went to the NIT. And he kept them in there. And if there's anybody who's got a bigger ego in basketball than Rick Pitino, I don't know who that is.
And more to your point about how some of these teams just treat the NIT, CBI, and other tournaments as beneath them. You had the Hoosiers AD in 2014 declining a CBI invitation, saying they're Indiana, they don't play in the CBI because there's such a stigma attached to these tertiary basketball tournaments. And to an extent, I get it. You have to pay to play. It's $27,000 to play in the CBI. It's not free like the NIT. You do have to pay. But at the end of the day, though, you're still giving these kids extra time to play the game, practice, and get better in hopes that it helps them improve for next season. It doesn't just have to end at, oh, well, we didn't make the tournament or NIT. Oh, well. No, I mean, if there's an invitation for the NIT or CBI or whatever, take it. Don't just spurn it. And that's my biggest issue with Blue Bloods, in basketball especially. They're so full of themselves, and they don't want to humble themselves and maybe consider that it's okay to play in a lesser tournament if you have a down year. Like, no one is going to judge you because you won the NIT. No one.
Well, I mean, just to put things into perspective, just real quick. So there's another blue blood that's in my state, University of Kentucky, and they are so used to winning, it's ridiculous. To the point to where, in the event that Kentucky loses, the next day, if you encounter a Kentucky fan, they are depressed, and they stay depressed until Kentucky wins again. So and they didn't even have a great year this year for Kentucky standards. They were miserable for 2 years. Like, the amount of Prozac that this freaking state consumed because of college basketball is a bit ridiculous. Louisville, we had 2 really bad years. They would not, somebody would have burned down the city of Lexington had Kentucky had the last 2 years that Louisville suffered through. Okay. But we still got up in the morning. We still went to work, and we're still okay. It sucks. We know we're going to watch somebody else play basketball. Kentucky fans, on the other hand, their whole world revolves around it. So whatever they were ever on the cusp of not making the tournament, which they had a couple of years, you just mentioned NIT to them and they'd cringe and they'd get so angry. Which, I'm like, yeah, hey, we got NIT banners up, They're like, well, yeah, that's fine for Loserville.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, all right, you're the ones that turn cats into 2 syllables. They do too, by the way. They go K-yuts. I don't know how they do it, but they managed to have 2 syllables on a 1-syllable word. So it's weird because that's the kind of fan base that they are too good to be at the NIT, even if that makes their team better next year, which to me blows my mind. Because it's like, you know what? Yeah, things didn't work out great for us. We had a rough year. We had a bunch of injuries. Or stuff just didn't go our way. That's fine. These kids want to keep playing. Let's keep cheering them on, and let's see how far they can get. You know what? You bring an NIT title home. I mean, maybe don't bring the NIT title home because,
then that has to go up in the rafters. But like you get to the finals, it's like, all right, you guys can win this one. So we don't have to update the NIT banner. That part's fine. I don't know. It's just one of those things that it kind of irks me about that fan base, among a bazillion other things. So I don't know, Finn. What do you think?
I mean, I'm more on like the player side. I mean, I do also like drawing comparisons to bowl games, and I think Michigan beating Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl on a New Year's Eve or early in the day. Probably not many people were watching that game, and if they were, it was either fans of the team or it was just the waiting room before the New Year's Six game later on that day. But that's a momentum changing win for something that quote unquote doesn't matter. Now, sure, they won the championship the year before, so it's not like they're starving for another one. But it's games like that you can have a matchup against a blue blood that had a quote unquote down season, but they're playing just as hard as you are. It's not like these early out of conference games where everyone is just kind of warming up. These games are tournament games that matter to everyone playing, and all of those extra reps, all of that time in the system. Now you're playing your system against other teams you may not have been able to match up with in the regular season. All of that has dividends going into the off season and as you get ready for the next season. And I mean, there's, it isn't, to me, it is an ego thing, like you guys were saying, to deny your players, your basketball players who are there in theory to play basketball. There's a conversation to be had about NIL and all that kind of stuff, but I never understood it. I'll never be in a position to make that kind of decision, so I'll put that as an asterisk. But I don't understand, denying your players an opportunity to play the game they love more against other people who are also playing the game they love at a competitive level. It's just, it gets to that politics level where it starts to affect the people actually playing the sport negatively.
I mean, the other benefit, Kentucky fans are going to understand because, for a long time they were the school of one and dones anyway, right? So you didn't have that benefit that you get with the bowl game of, okay, my best players are sitting. Now let's see what all my up and comers are going to do versus Division I talent, right? It's not against the practice squad. It's not against, it's not just another practice. It's not against a spring game. Like you are going up against another team that is hell bent on beating you at your level. And so even if you lose that game, you still learn a lot from a loss. Especially like if you're in the football world of things, you think about like some bench warmer quarterback that never gets to go out and play except for maybe to close out a game because you're up 50 and you don't want your superstar to get hurt, and he gets to go out there and he gets to lead the team. He gets practical experience leading the team in combat. And you could get that same experience in basketball of, hey, you know what? I'm getting these extra games and, my bench is going to get a lot more reps. Maybe these are guys that are going to be critical to my team next year. They're going to see reps now that my superstar, he's probably going to be going off to the NBA, and it will let me know as if I'm the coach what I can build my next team around. There's a lot there that they can benefit. Plus, you're playing against potentially maybe like a Little Sisters of the Poor or a little Bobby Morris that's a full-fledged Division I team that is going to be trying their dickens to beat you because this is their tournament. And how dare you suck so bad that you ended up down here? And, it's so beneficial for a big-time team. It just really bothers me that
He wants Colorado to get that crown championship.
Oh yeah, you know it.
Oh no!
That crown championship batter real quick.
You better hang the banner up. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You should go to that ceremony.
Oh yeah.
Parade
I'll
in
be
Boulder.
I'll be
Look at
cutting
that.
that down,
Go to the airport when the team flies back, cheering them on.
Hey, I mean, to be fair, if they won the crown, I'll take it after a 3 conference win season. you know, whatever. I'll take it. I'll take what I can get at this point.
That sounds good.
And I can
All
just
right.
live vicariously through CSU.
Yes, there you go.
Or Rams, I guess.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, that's music to my ears. All right. And on that note, we'll go ahead and we'll do the closer here. So, like, hey, if you enjoyed this, give us a follow. If you're finding us on Spotify, if you're finding us on the YouTube, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll be back next week with probably some more basketball talk and find out how badly our brackets have been doing.